Worry.
I've done that. No.
Thank you. Thanks again. So the objectives of today are to gain understanding of behavioral and psychological vulnerabilities during COVID-19 pandemic, to learn how to build our personal resilience and to enhance awareness, self-awareness, personal development, and individual coping strategies. So the two key messages I want you to remember here: the psychological vulnerability and the personal resilience. And we'll talk about these two messages in some detail. So starting with the psychological vulnerability, people sometimes think that it was a complete surprise. People blame 2020 for being a horrible year due to the pandemic, which is all understandable. But at the same time, it was actually predicted. So there is a professor of psychology called Stephen Taylor from Canada, and he published a book just before the pandemic came into light, and he described a pandemic in the near future with some form of influenza and potentially devastating consequences. And he talks about psychological factors that are important in understanding and managing those societal problems associated with the pandemic. And he talks about spreading fears, he talks about stigmatization, xenophobia, all the things that we ended up seeing. So sometimes people, when we talk about things being predictable, people associate that with conspiracy theory. When Bill Gates gave his TED talk a few years back about the pandemic being the future pandemic being the highest risk to humanity, he's been now cited as someone who on purpose did something to create it. Obviously, this is not true. And I'm going to take you through the history of pandemics. So pandemics didn't come to us with Bill Gates or Stephen Taylor or just recent development. We've had pandemics throughout history, countless numbers of pandemics. And I'm here just highlighting some of these. So the bubonic plague that happened in the 14th century, around 100 to 200 million people died. That was a third of the entire world population at the time, were just wiped out by a pandemic. Then we had the Russian flu, the Spanish flu, the Asian flu, the Hong Kong flu, the swine flu, the Ebola virus. So we had so many of these. And instead of going to what maybe Western scientists talk about the plague, I'm going to cite someone you will be very familiar with, Ibn Battuta. So Ibn Battuta, as you know, he's an explorer who traveled the world at the time. He wrote about fascinating experiences. And at some point now, he ended up being in a pandemic, and he talked about it. So I'm going to show you a video. So this is only a small part of the video, and this is his account of what happened during this pandemic. Can you see now the screen?
Yes.
Can you hear it?
No.
Can you hear the sound? I've stopped it just to check. Can you hear the sound?
I don't think, Muhammad, do you hear it? I can hear it. I can.
We cannot hear. I told you just to, when you click on share, you have to put include the sound from the computer audio. That check okay. You have to. Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
the first dark cloud in what would be a storm of sadness. He arrived in Damascus to find that the son he'd left behind, with one of his many ex-wives, had died in childhood, and a separate message told him that his father had passed away 15 years before. Saddened, he took a trip to Aleppo. But as he traveled, a great curtain was being pulled across Syria. The Black Plague descended on the Middle East, chasing him on the road. He fled back to Damascus, but found the oasis city ground to a halt, with 2,000 dying every day and the populace in terror. As in Europe, the Islamic world believed the disease came from a religious rather than medical source. But while Christian Europe interpreted it as punishment for human sin and greeted the plague with apocalyptic sermons, self-flagellation, and massacres of their Jewish neighbors, Islamic cities looked on it as a manifestation of the divine will. To them, it was an aspect of God's unknowable plan that must simply be endured with humility. Ibn Battuta saw the residents of Damascus fast for 3 days, followed by a packed day of prayer and supplication in the mosque. Afterward, the multi-ethnic populace paraded through the city streets together, holding aloft copies of their holy texts. Muslims carried the Quran, Christians the Bible, and Jews the Torah, all with tears, imploring their God to stop the suffering. Damascus would lose more than 30,000 citizens to the disease, its streets choked with funeral parades, corpses left uncovered due to the city running out of burial shrouds. Ibn Battuta fled to Cairo, passing empty villages and bodies along the road. And when he arrived, he found the great city, with a population of 500,000, deserted by its leaders and losing 24,000 residents each day. Plague would eventually kill 200,000, including most of the army officers, sending the Mamluk Sultanate into decline. But in 1348, the worst year of the plague, Ibn Battuta made it to Mecca and fulfilled his goal of making the Hajj one last time. It must have made him think of his first pilgrimage, when he left Tangier at the age of 21, freshly graduated and never having left home. Now, he was a 45-year-old man. I was moved by memories of my homeland, he wrote. Affection for my family and dear friends, who drew me toward my land, which in my opinion was better than any other country. Yet when he arrived home in Tangier, he found his mother had died of plague as well. And days later, he was on the road again. At a loss for what to do, he volunteered as a soldier to defend the Rock of Gibraltar from a Spanish siege.
So this is a small snapshot of Ibn Battuta's experience of the plague. And as you can see, it's horrifying. So many people died because of the plague during that time. So I'm going to bring back the slides. So what happens during pandemics? Humans, we have our behaviors that we sometimes change during pandemics. So the human behavior is so important in terms of containing the pandemic versus spreading it out. And obviously the public authorities will tell you what not to do and what to do, but also there are self-imposed restrictions. And the human behavior is driven by risk perception and fear of disease and consequences of a diagnosis. So we've had throughout the world, we've had so many people going to hospital, not really needing to be in hospital, but just because they had some minor symptoms, but they were frightened of getting the illness. On the other hand, we've had people who are seriously ill, and that doesn't have to be to do with COVID situation. You know, people who had maybe diabetes, who had problems with heart conditions. They didn't go to seek help because on one hand, they didn't want to get infected because they thought, you know, hospitals are full of COVID. On the other hand, they may thought that maybe doctors and nurses are so busy and they are less important than others. And the worst of many other things is the stigma of the diagnosis. And it's really a fascinating thing to think about. You know, people have no fault of their own. They get the illness, and yet we talk about people with COVID in a sometimes derogatory way. We say, someone with COVID, there are names that they have been called. So people avoid the diagnosis even if they have symptoms sometimes, which is risky in terms of spreading the disease or stopping the spread of the disease. So the other problem is the uncertainty, and we've seen this throughout COVID situation. I had so many plans to go to conferences, to go on holidays, to come actually to Sharjah at the beginning of the academic year. All these plans couldn't go ahead, and I had to deal with that. It was very uncertain, and the same thing applies to possibly every one of you. So it's not easy to deal with the uncertainty, and that can create anxiety and can make people intolerant to these situations. People with generalized anxiety disorder, people with autism spectrum disorder are more likely to be struggling during uncertain times. So we need to understand those uncertainties. We need to address them. We need to help people to manage the distress. The emotional impact, and we've seen this. If you remember, you must have seen this on TV. The panic buying. Stores and supermarkets ran out of soap, hand sanitizers for obvious reasons, but ran out of toilet papers. It's funny, and at the same time, you can see why people are just storing food. So people are panicking, and they are shocked by what they see. There is the anger there, and that anger can be towards others. It can be towards themselves. There is the fear, frustration, confusion. During lockdown, a lot of people were feeling bored because you cannot do the things that you are used to do. A student cannot go to university. They had to adapt to new lifestyle of doing things online, and online there are lots of distractions as well. So that can affect people's ability to socialize with others. They feel more isolated. They can feel stigmatized. They can have trouble with sleep, and they can have trouble with mood and feeling depressed. And across all of that, we hear the term new normal. So after all of this, after the pandemic is over, we will have a new normal. And the new normal can be something that can be positive for us if we learn some lessons, and it can be negative if we just, go back to old habits. So let's talk more about that. So the impact of on mental health for people who have pre-existing conditions such as anxiety and depression. We've seen increased number of cases. We've seen a lot of people with psychotic symptoms suffering, and PTSD. So people who've gone to hospitals and are traumatized by that, or people who lost their loved ones and they couldn't attend funerals because of the COVID risk of transmission, and that all affected people's mental health, particularly if they had a pre-existing condition. So we've seen an increase in suicidal thoughts, suicidal self-harm behaviors. People end up using inappropriate ways to cope with stress, like alcohol and substances. People who are locked down may be suffering because of financial trouble. They end up becoming more aggressive, and that can lead to domestic violence. So we've seen a huge impact on mental health. And I'm going to show you just one study from Saudi Arabia. So that's kind of closer to home here. And This study on 625 medical students, they were surveyed, and the impact of quarantine on their mental health was huge. 44% showed a sense of being emotionally detached from family, friends, and other colleagues. And around a third showed significant feelings of hopelessness, exhaustedness, and emotionally unresponsiveness. And more than said that their performance, their study has been affected. So when we talk about depression as a clinical diagnosis, I would like just to make sure that people are aware of how depression clinically manifests itself, because we use the word all the time. And depression as a clinical diagnosis, when we have a number of symptoms for at least 2 weeks, most probably much longer, and at least we have one of two symptoms, either low mood or irritability or loss of interest. So things that we used to enjoy, we no longer enjoy. But in addition to those two core symptoms, we have other symptoms: feeling tired most of the time, not being able to sleep, or waking up early in the morning, or sometimes sleeping more but not getting refreshed by the sleep. The appetite can change, so it can either decrease, so people lose appetite, lose weight, or sometimes it can increase. And if you ask people, they often say that they are feeling not necessarily more hungry, but they comfort eat. That's why they gain weight. Concentration and memory are affected. People cannot concentrate, cannot focus on their work, their study. They feel hopeless, they feel helpless. They sometimes feel worthless, and that can affect them feeling worth living. So that what we call suicidal thoughts. It can be negative and passive in a way that you feel that your life isn't worth living without you wanting to do anything about it. And it can be active, where people try to harm themselves or end their lives. So I'm going to show you another video, and this is about depression. So just to be clear what depression is, because it's very common. Around 1 in 6 people, and that statistics is a pretty consistent throughout the world, that around 1 in 6 people experience depression at least once in their lifetimes as a clinical diagnosis. So I'm going to share this.
Dog. His name was Depression. Whenever the black dog made an appearance, I felt empty and life just seemed to slow down. He could surprise me with a visit for no reason or occasion. The black dog made me look and feel older than my years. When the rest of the world seemed to be enjoying life, I could only see it through the black dog. Activities that usually brought me pleasure suddenly ceased to. He liked to ruin my appetite. He chewed up my memory and my ability to concentrate. Doing anything or going anywhere with the black dog required superhuman strength. At social occasions, he'd sniff up what confidence I had and chase it away. My biggest fear was being found out. I worried that people would judge me. Because of the shame and stigma of the black dog, I was constantly worried that I'd be found out. So I invested vast amounts of energy into covering him up. Keeping up an emotional lie is exhausting. Black dog could make me think and say negative things. He could make me irritable and difficult to be around. He would take my love and bury my intimacy. He loved nothing more than to wake me up with highly repetitive and negative thinking. He also liked to remind me how exhausted I was going to be the next day. Having a black dog in your life isn't so much about feeling a bit down, sad or blue. At its worst, it's about being devoid of feeling altogether. As I got older, the black dog got bigger and he started hanging around all the time. I'd chase him off with whatever I thought might send him running. But more often than not, he'd come out on top. Going down became easier than getting up again. So I became rather good at self-medication, which never really helped. Eventually, I felt totally isolated from everything and everyone. The black dog had finally succeeded in hijacking my life. When you lose all joy in life, you can begin to question what the point of it is. Thankfully, this was the time that I sought professional help. This was my first step towards recovery and a major turning point in my life. I learned that it doesn't matter who you are, millions and millions of people. It is an equal opportunity mongrel. I also learned that there was no silver bullet or magic pill. Medication can help some, and others might need a different approach altogether. I also learned that being emotionally genuine and authentic to those who are close to you can be an absolute game changer. Most importantly, I learned not to be afraid of the black dog, and I taught him a few new tricks of my own. The more tired and stressed you are, the louder he barks. So it's important to learn how to quiet your mind. It's been clinically proven that regular exercise can be as effective for treating mild to moderate depression as antidepressants. So go for a walk or a run and leave the mutt behind. Keep a mood journal. Getting your thoughts on paper can be cathartic and often insightful. Also keep track of the things that you have to be grateful for. The most important thing to remember is that no matter how bad it gets, if you take the right steps, talk to the right people, black dog days can and will pass. I wouldn't say that I'm grateful for the black dog, but he's been an incredible teacher. He forced me to reevaluate and simplify my life. I learned that rather than running away from my problems, it's better to embrace them. The black dog may always be part of my life, but he'll never be the beast that he was. We have an understanding. I've learned through knowledge, patience, discipline and humour, the worst black dog can be made to heal. If you're in difficulty, never be afraid to ask for help. There is absolutely...
Okay, so what do you think of the video? Any thoughts about the video?
In Sydney, Dr. Hamid, there is a Black Dog Institute, an institute for mental health services, but mainly for research. It fund research into depression in particular.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So, in terms of the help for depression, the video mentioned about medication. So there is no there is I think there's some background noise.
Can you please mute your mic? Can you all please kindly mute your mic? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So with the medication, it's important to remember that antidepressants are effective in the vast majority of people, and they are not addictive. So you may need to take them for a certain period of time, which might be long, but that's not because they're addictive. It's because you need them the same way you would need antihypertensive medications or medication for diabetes. There are psychological therapies, and I don't think we have the time to discuss these in details, but particularly cognitive behavioral therapy that address how our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviors are all interlinked. There are physical treatments recently developed, for example, transcranial magnetic stimulation or RTMS, and there are social support strategies that can help, like occupational therapy, befriending, and in a case of an emergent situation, an inpatient care might be considered. So now moving on to personal resilience. And when we talk about personal resilience, a lot of people think of it as you're born with it, you're a strong individual, you have to survive, you rely on yourself but no one else, always knowing what to do with the logo, improvise, adapt, and overcome. A lot of these are actually fallacies, so they're not really true. The actual trueness in resilience, that people can be struggling and can be struggling together. So problems can be shared, and each one of us can help the other person. So we can learn how to develop resilience. And it's about knowing what is the support system that's there for you and how to access it, and not being afraid to ask and understand the need that you really need to bounce forward. You know, people talk about bouncing back, but actually it's more about bouncing forward. Despite, so you might bounce forward with more strength or damage throughout the process, but in the end, the fact about resilience is about something that you can develop and you can get support for. So it's the process of capacity for or outcome of successful adaptation despite challenges or threatening circumstances. And we as humans have different ways to cope with stress. And promoting resilience can help us develop strategies to overcome those difficulties and not to go into mental health problems. Now, people ask about what happens in children. And I would like to tell you that the vast majority of children are like dandelions. And dandelions can grow in any environment. They will just, take root, survive almost everywhere, whatever the condition is, even if it's not optimal. So we don't really need to worry too much about children. They need just good enough support, good enough parenting. Now, there are some children like the orchids, and those children are actually, they have special needs, and the orchids can only bloom in certain situation. And when it blooms, it is fantastic, it's beautiful. So we need to think what conditions we can offer to people who have special needs to be like an orchid. So I actually developed this recipe for you, recipe for resilience. And I thought, what are the things that we need to do to improve our resilience? So the first thing is find your sense of purpose, and then understand yourself, become a continuous learner, embrace change, ensure positivity, strategies for problems, and sleep well. So only 7 steps, and that's the route to success. So basically, that's what success. If you forget those steps, remember the word success. So it's a sense of purpose. Start with a sense of purpose. Having a structure in your life, commitment and meaning. Sometimes we think that, okay, let me just kind of take a break out of everything, which is fine, yeah, but you realize that actually you take another commitment, you can make it work, okay, to a certain extent. But if you feel that you have no purpose in life, you feel that there is no direction, you're not going to be able to manage setbacks. So it's really important that you can achieve the sense of purpose by, if you're feeling stressed, you reflect on why you're feeling like this, why you're under pressure, how can you manage that, what's your meaning in life, and that can help you with a sense of purpose. Now, The second tip for everyone is to understand yourself. And we really sometimes struggle to understand who we are. We don't usually reflect a lot on experiences, but this is how we learn, is by reflecting on every encounter that happened with us, whether it's positive or negative. And this reflection can help us look back and remember those challenges. And when sometimes people in a moment of despair, they just feel that there is nothing in life that's good. Everything is going bad. But a moment of reflection will tell you that actually you've succeeded so many times, and you've overcome so many difficulties. So this understanding and reflection of your self-awareness is key. Now, becoming a continuous learner, we all now talk about lifelong learning, and we really need to think about the new skills. The new skills can help you today, can help you in the future. Even, new studies are talking about how to delay memory impairment in older age, and actually learning can enhance, but also learning something new can make you challenge those bad habits. Is this the only way we do things? If I do things in an old-fashioned way, or are there other better ways to deal with that? So do I need to always go to the safe way of doing it, or can I learn something new that's more effective? Now, embrace change. And here we talked about uncertainty. And people who are rigid, they find it difficult during uncertain times like COVID. But flexibility is key to developing resilience. And this is something you can learn. You can learn to be more flexible, more adaptable, to accept different ways of doing things. We all go through challenges in life. We go through crises like this one. And it's really important to get outside the comfort zone and increase our curiosity and openness to new experiences. Now, developing strategies for problem solving. So the way we perceive situations, solve problems, and manage change is crucial. And we need to take a step back and think how we approach managing difficult issues. How often our judgment is clouded by emotional responses and irrational thinking. And maybe this is a topic for a talk here in the future, about how many decisions that we make, actually, they are completely irrational. Thinking about, for example, hygiene before the pandemic, which is, I think, one of the fortunate things that we've learned now, that actually science tells us that when you go to a restaurant, the menu that you touch while you're eating is many, many times more dirty than the toilet seat. But we still, if we go to the toilet, most of us, hopefully, wash our hands. But many of us didn't wash our hands after touching the menu, or felt embarrassed, even if we thought it's a good idea, knowing that it is dirty. But luckily now we've learned through experience that we should, either maybe have this online menu, or if we touch it, they will offer you something to clean your hands. Now, finally, it's about sleeping well. And really, it's about respecting yourself, taking a break. And sleep is so important, because if you don't sleep well in the morning, you're going to feel exhausted. You're not going to be able to focus on things that you have to focus on. And sleep is part of a wider thing, looking after your appetite, eating well, exercising, all the good habits. You can do that to help yourself to improve your health and develop the resilience. So just to summarize what I've said in some key messages here, is that resilience is about reaching out for support and for new opportunities, to be curious, to be keen on going beyond your comfort zone and learning new experiences and embracing change. It's about emotional awareness. It's about learning who you are, identifying your emotions, trying to develop empathy. So empathy is really key. It is about knowing how people would react, would feel if they were if you were in their situation. So putting yourself in someone else's shoes, and the personal vision, having goals, having clear objectives, having purpose in life, believing that you can solve problems. And this is true, because none of you has never solved so many problems. You all have done that. And having a sense of optimism is so key. It's, that's probably another talk about optimism, about positive psychology. So positive psychology is not about cheating yourself. It's not about telling yourself what is not true being true, but just the fact that when you approach something from a positive attitude, it's more likely that you will be able to conquer it. It's more likely that you'll be able to achieve it if in the other situation, when you don't have the positive and optimistic attitude. So the self-help strategies that I'm going to ask everyone, including myself, to try to master: eating well, avoiding alcohol and illicit drugs, exercising, creative activities, keeping in touch with family and friends, especially during those difficult times. We may not be able to spend as much time with our family and friends, but we can still talk to them. Nowadays, there are so many good ways to deal with that, including social media, including Zoom, and so on. And talking about our feelings, not struggling alone, valuing ourselves, taking a break, and finally practicing mindfulness. And for those who've not heard of mindfulness before, it's about being present at the present time. So a lot of us either live in the past or the future. So we're either worried about what we've done and just feeling bad, I should have done this in this way, or worried about the future. What's going to happen if I don't do this? What's going to happen if I do this? So we worry a lot. What we don't live is the present moment, being present at the present time. And if you see this picture is a good example. We've got the person who is walking in the park is thinking about hundreds of things, maybe the car, maybe someone who upset him, maybe the post, maybe jobs that he has to do, maybe a talk that he has to give, like myself today. And the dog is just enjoying the moment. There are trees, there is a sun, and enjoying the moment. So mindfulness teaches us how to live the moment. So maybe that's another talk. So I've already, Prof. Nabil, I've already secured myself 3 talks. That's the end of my talk. Thank you so much for listening. I'm ready for any suggestions, any questions.
Super. Thank you so much, Dr. Hamid. Very enjoyable presentation. Thank you very much. The most important thing is your commitment to 3 further talks. I'm so happy. I'm so happy. I'm gonna organize it from tomorrow, actually. Okay, so the floor is open to questions. If you like, you can write your questions or open the mic. Meanwhile, you know, Dr. Hamid, I really thank you very much indeed again. But the positive terminology, that positivity, optimism, flexibility, um, um, full-mindedness, and all of these positive attitudes to life. Why some of us are really good at this and are resilient more than others, and why some of us during these difficult times are finding it very difficult to cope compared with others. What are the tricks? Why is that?
That's a really good question, Prof. Nabil. So there are personal factors. There are factors to do with the family, the upbringing, the environment, and there are obviously factors to do with your biology. So when in psychiatry, we often talk about a biopsychosocial model of understanding complex situations. So we all know that for whatever reason, some of us are more prone to stress and stress reaction, and we you know, the scientists have studied certain genes. For example, there is a gene to do with serotonin. It's called 5-HT transporter gene. That is, if you have the shorter allele, for example, you're more likely to have the kind of stress reaction to lead you to develop mental health problems like depression. But that's only a small part of the story. We can't change our genes. What we can, I don't mean the genes that you're wearing, I mean the genes in your body. So, but what we can, you know, there are personal traits, and those personal traits, actually, do you know that if you're more humorous, they're more likely to be resilient? Just the fact that if you learn how to crack a few jokes, you'll become more resilient. And you know, this is not difficult to learn. You know, being persistent. So how many of us will give up after the first attempt? You know, I tried something, it doesn't work, it's not meant for me. Well, I'm not going to tell you, you know, those stories about Jack Ma and whoever who applied 30 times, or J.K. Rowling, who, you know, when she wrote her book about Harry Potter, she sent it to 33 publishers. So it could have been, if she gave up at attempt 30, we've never heard of Harry Potter. Because she persevered, we all know about Harry Potter. She has become the first billionaire writer. So perseverance is something in your hands. You know, this is not about your genes. It's about you deciding, okay, do I give up? Do I not give up? Now, there are things to do with the environment. And when we talk about the environment, particularly for parents here, because probably they're going to ask, how can I look after my children? And you know, being consistent with your kids, the parents having some sort of understanding, you know, the mother and the father, so we don't argue, we don't have the worst arguments in front of our kids. And if we do have some arguments, we come to a resolution. And then in terms of the, you know, going to school, sometimes parents want their children to just focus on, you know, get your maths, get your English, grammar and stuff, yeah? But actually extracurricular activities can improve your resilience. So things like that, having a mentor who is not a family member, giving a purpose to the child. So, you know, let the child volunteer. So there are so many things we can do in addition to obviously the success, the 7 things that I've mentioned, that we can help develop the resilience. So it's not an excuse that some people are more prone to being more resilient, because we can achieve resilience if we decide it.
Thank you. I'm still waiting for any question, any comment, although we are getting positive feedback about your lecture on the chat, but no questions. Let me continue then. Look, Dr. Hamid, as you mentioned in your talk, particularly in our region, there's lots of conspiracy theories, but particularly the ones related to COVID-19, you know, all sorts of conspiracies there. How is this conspiracy thinking, conspiracy theory affect our mental health? And what is your recommendation in that regard?
So, I mean, conspiracy theories are not new. And the problem with conspiracy theory is that you can tell it's a conspiracy theory if you ask yourself the question. Now, today, we're going to either develop the vaccine or not be able to develop the vaccine. And then if we develop the vaccine, it's going to either work or not work. Okay, if you tell yourself that regardless of what is going to happen, you're still going to believe that it's a conspiracy, then it must be a conspiracy. You must be wrong. You know, when I don't want to bring any political issues, obviously, here, but yeah, this is part of the conspiracy. When a famous world leader said that he had the COVID-19, then people with conspiracy said, well, if he dies, then it's a conspiracy to get rid of him. If he survives, it's a conspiracy, so he is he can win the elections. If he doesn't win the elections, then it's a conspiracy because. So basically, when you see that your baseline is a conspiracy, and whatever is going to happen is just feeding into your conspiracy, then it must be wrong. Okay, so that's kind of a first thing I wanted people to know. But then I think the other thing is that it's for us, the educated, to teach people. You know, when people heard about coronavirus, they went to an old say film mentioning coronavirus and saying, well, it must be a conspiracy because an old film mentioned it. But we knew that coronavirus type of viruses existed. Okay, so we as educated people, we need to teach others about the evidence, about what is backed by evidence, and what is something that we are not sure about, and we need to accept some sort of uncertainty. You know, not everything is evidence-based, and sometimes what the scientists are going to advise in a year's time is going to be, it must be different. Otherwise, we would not have achieved any progress. But this is the advantage of being in a world that supports evidence-based. Okay, so we don't have kind of absolute knowledge about the COVID. It's a new thing. Okay, so I hope that I addressed some of the key issues. I know that I could talk even more about it.
No, thank you, thank you. There is a question about vitamin. Look, we've been told, all of us, whether we are in the health field or not, health professionals or not, that in order to boost your immunity, take lots of vitamins, including vitamin D, including zinc, vitamin C, and the like. And there is a question from Dr. Aranda, I think. Will this help our mental health as well? Is there any evidence suggesting that if you take more specific vitamins can actually help our resilience, our mental health, make us a bit more in control? What is your take on this?
Yeah, so this is a really important topic, and it's a good question. So thank you for raising it. So as we know, vitamins are so important. So if we have deficiency in any of the vitamins, then we are likely to experience symptoms, including mental health symptoms. So, for example, vitamin D deficiency, which is very common in the West, is common in here for various reasons. It can manifest itself in reduced immunity. It can manifest itself in, for example, feeling fatigued, feeling slow, and that can mimic some of the symptoms that we see in mental health. Yeah, so it will exacerbate your condition if you have a pre-existing condition. If you don't have a pre-existing condition, you will have symptoms similar to what we see in mental health. So having said that, that's if you have deficiency. So I'm all for taking vitamins if you have deficiency to supplement any deficiency. Okay, what the evidence isn't available at the moment, or as far as I know, is that having pharmacological effects. So if you have, say, your vitamin D is above 50 and it is definitely within normal, would you still take it, and would that make a difference? There is, as far as I know, there is no evidence for that. But people need to remember that many of us have vitamin D deficiency, which is the most cited one in this situation. So taking it maybe, or exposing yourself to sunshine in the morning or in the evening, where you can get some natural vitamin D. These are all good ideas.
Thank you. Actually, this question was from Dr. Wajdan Bani Isa, not from Randa Fakhri. I'm sorry. Okay. 3 more minutes left, and there is no further question from the audience.
If you allow me, Dr. Nabil, it was very. Is it okay to ask now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. There was a really awesome presentation. I think we all need the skills to be resilient, and the fact we're dealing with our children in our school, it's really very hard for us to be resilient as parents. And I always ask my colleagues about something to boost my energy and my immunity. And everyone is in agreement that vitamin D is good, but I want to ask about something like Ayurvedic medicine, or I don't know if you hear about ashwagandha. Everybody is talking about the Ayurvedic medicine and how it's good to boost to prevent depression, or omega-369. I don't know if those two things are anything around them in science regarding to like increase energy, concentration, sharpness, resilience, all these good terminologies that we all need at the moment. So I don't know.
So the omega-3, I heard that. What was the other one?
The ashwagandha, it's called ashwagandha.
Ashwagandha, yeah, okay.
Ashwagandha, it's like of Ayurvedic medicine, and everyone, yeah. I'm hearing some good news. I was reading about it. They say that it's good for if you're depressed or having like situation where it trigger your stress level. It might help in minimizing the effect on your body. I don't know if this is true, but it's interesting that you came on time actually to ask you such a question.
Okay, good. So this is an evolving field, and we are learning more about it at the moment. So people, there are complements that can use to help with milder forms of depression and anxiety. And the evidence for moderate to severe depression doesn't exist. So I think if we are talking about someone who has very mild symptoms and they want to try something, there are a number of these. The evidence is not huge, but there are some, quasi scientific studies about these. When you have the same rigor that you have in a randomized control trial, most of these don't demonstrate the same effect. But the general advice is that if it's a milder form and if the safety has been tested, so it's okay. If it's a more severe form or even a moderate form of a mental health condition, so I think definitely we need the specialist to see the person here, the patient would be, and to give them the right medication that's backed by randomized controlled trials.
Thank you. I have two more questions, one from Dr. Basima and one from Dr. Khalid Ghazi. Dr. Basima, تفضلي.
Thank you very much, Prof. Nabil. Thank you very much, Dr. Hamid, for a very interesting and informative presentation. Very much needed, actually. My question is, I mean, you've already answered a lot of what I wanted to ask, but in your last slide, you said there's, the fine line between mindfulness and being mindful. And I really like that because I think for me, I'm sort of more on the mindfulness side of things. And I know in the end, it's sort of a fine line between both. Yet, and the thing is that we know that we should free our minds, we should meditate, we should try and, unload some of what we carry, yet we don't. I mean, my question to you is, how can we, or maybe there is some way, I mean, it's not going to probably be answered in one session, to maybe train ourselves or some practical guides of how we can, become more mindful and less mindfulness.
So mindfulness itself, thank you for the question. It's very interesting. It's very important. And I already volunteered myself to give a talk about it. But
Excellent.
It is one of those topics that emerged, in the last not very long, and the evidence suggesting that it does help with conditions like depression, sleep problems, chronic fatigue. And what it is about mindfulness is that it is about living the present time. So there is a bit of meditation there. It is about paying attention to the present moment in a non-judgmental way, because we often become judgmental. We either say someone did something wrong, or we say we have done something wrong. And it's about being curious, and it's about not wanting to be too hurtful to anybody. So being kind to us, being kind to others. And that can be in various different ways. So it can be in a breathing exercise. So I could just spend 1 or 2 minutes taking a deep breath and paying attention to what's happening while I'm breathing. So as the air is going inside me. So what I'm doing here, I'm training my mind instead of wandering and going around like a bull in a china shop. I'm training my mind to just focus on one thing, okay? And breathing out. It can be kind of more longer meditation, like body scan, or focusing on, maybe lighting a candle. And it can be, you can incorporate it in your daily life. And this is what I like about mindfulness, because most of us are very busy. So most of us will be reluctant to set like 20, 30 minutes to do something completely meditation. But if I try to brush my teeth mindfully, if I try to eat my apple mindfully, then that's great, I can still do that, and it works, and it's beautiful. So I don't know if I answered your question. This is my kind of brief comment on it.
Yes, very much so. I'll start my breathing straight away. Thank you.
I've already started.
Good.
Dr. Khalid. Dr. Khalid Ghazi.
I'd like to thank you, Doctor, for your really comprehensive and beneficial presentation. But I've always had this question in mind as a medical student. I found it somehow hard to manage between the different responsibilities that a student has, like studies, my gym routine, my family relationships, social responsibilities with and social life with maybe my friends and my body needs. And as you've mentioned in one of your slides, like you've mentioned what's called the state of mindfulness, and with you, what you have just answered, Dr. Bassem, and I also like to thank her for asking this question. But from like a student perspective, how could a college student be able to manage all of these responsibilities and things to do, and at the same time have time to think about the present instead of just thinking about the future goals and fears and concerns and all these things?
Thank you. It is a brave question, and it's very true. You know, I've not forgotten the time when I was a medical student. It's a very stressful time, and I am aware of how difficult it is to juggle so many things around. I think my brief answer to this is that about kind of prioritizing. So in terms of time management, you have to prioritize. And you have to understand your strengths and your limitations. And when we talk about your strengths, you know, some people work better if you all kind of prepare things in advance. Some people perform better at the last minute. If you are someone who becomes more anxious and tend not to be able to perform well at a last minute, you should never leave things to the last minute. But it's always a good idea to try to prepare in advance. So it's about structuring the day. And let me just give you this example. Now, imagine that a woodcutter is cutting a wood, and so desperate to cut the wood because this is a woodcutter, you know, they have to sell this, they have to, bring money to the family and stuff, yeah? So he has a saw and trying to saw through a piece of wood, yeah? And if the saw is not sharp, it's blunt, yeah? This person is going to likely to spend more time trying to cut or trying to saw through the wood and achieving very little. And think about what you do when you're exhausted mentally. Even if you spend hours studying, your achievement is going to be very little. But what would be the best thing for that person to do? To sharpen the saw, isn't it? Sharpen the saw, spend 5 minutes sharpening the saw, and then you will achieve more, you'll cut more. But the problem is that you tell him, sharpen the saw, he will tell you, I have no time to sharpen the saw because I'm desperate, I want to finish so I can go and sell this and get money and get food for my family. So think about it in your life. If you are spending hours and hours and achieving very little on your study, think about this example. Take a break. And what would be the best break? It would be one of two. One would be something that involves physical activity, especially if it's something that you enjoy, like going out for a run, anything that involves physical activity. Second one would be to take a moment for yourself, do something like mindfulness.
Very interesting.
Thank you, Doctor, for your answer. I really found it helpful. So it is essential to prioritize things and plan for things ahead, and to think smart instead of just being a hard worker. So you need to know when to what to do and how to do things, and instead of just going through the flow of things. Yeah. Thank you, Doctor. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Dr. Hamid, I think We have 10 minutes more than the planned time. So again, I would like personally to thank you very much indeed for a very interesting presentation. On behalf of my colleague at the Department of Family and Community Medicine, certainly on behalf of our Dean and Vice Chancellor, Professor Qutaiba Hamid, we would like to thank you very much for the time spent in preparing such a very exciting presentation. And I will take your word for at least planning 2 or 3 further presentation as soon as possible, Dr. Hamid. And thank you all for attending. Thank you for participation. I think you agree with me that this time spent during the last 70 minutes was very worthwhile, particularly in this difficult time. Keep positive, smile, sense of humor, you said, be flexible, sleep well, eat well, and then you will be well. And mindfulness. Is that enough, Dr. Hamid?
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Professor Nabil Suleiman. Thanks, everyone. It's been a great pleasure being here. Thank you for being so interactive audience.
Thank you. Thank you all. Assalamu alaikum. Have a great night. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.